I'd like to begin by thanking the organizers for this kind invitation. I've been asked to look at small states, Muslim countries, within this context of democracy and big power competition. Before I focus upon my topic, let me say this, that the global system is in a mess, that international politics is in a state of crisis. That crisis is not caused by what the Western media tells us. It's because Russia is about to gobble up Ukraine, or because China may attack Taiwan. That those are not the reasons why the world is in a mess. It is in a mess, and this must be emphasized over and over again, because the United States of America and its allies are determined to perpetuate the existing order which allows them to dominate and to control the planet. In other words, they want to ensure that they remain the hegemonic power in the world, which is a role that they have played with varying degrees of success over the last few decades. They want to perpetuate that hegemony. They feel that hegemony is being threatened because realities are changing. The power structure is changing because new centers of power are emerging, new relationships are being forged, and the United States is worried that it will lose its grip, it will lose its dominant position. That is the underlying cause for the global crisis. Now, let me look at small states and Muslim countries, the topic I've been given, within this context. I want to be very candid with you. While there have been some successes, small countries, Muslim states have benefited in small ways from the existing order, the order after the Second World War. The fact is that by and large, they have suffered under this system. They have been witnesses to and victims of wars. The Korean War, the Vietnam War, millions dead, hundreds of thousands maimed and injured as a result of these wars, fought in Asia, small countries, middling powers. We're also aware that there have been attempts to usurp the resources of the small states, what had happened to Iraq, to other countries in West Asia, in North Africa. This is the reality. The reality is that governments have been ousted, dictators have been installed, dictators, mind you, installed by the world's leading democracy in order to perpetuate that democracy's interests. That has happened over and over again, from Lebanon to the Congo, to Chile, to Nicaragua, to any number of states. This is the reality. This is what has been happening to small states, to Muslim countries, and so on. We're also aware of the other inequities and injustices, vast gaps between rich and poor. It has become worse over the decades, greater concentration of wealth, greater control over the global financial system, attempts to control strategic routes, everything on behalf of the dominant hegemon and its allies. This is the reality. We cannot say that it has been a happy time for us. We have suffered a great deal. We've paid in terms of lives, paid in terms of our resources. We've paid in terms of not just our future, we have even had to mortgage our heritage, our past. Look at what had happened to Syria, what had happened to Libya in terms of their heritage, because they had been conquered at some point on. This is the reality. Now, I was also asked to look at the attitude towards Muslim countries, and we have to talk invariably about Islamophobia. Islamophobia is actually a continuation of something that has happened for a long while. The fear of Islam is rooted in history for hundreds of years. And the root cause, again, is related to power. The West began to react this way to Islamic civilization from the 9th and 10th centuries onwards, because Islam is the only non-Western civilization that has conquered and occupied parts of Europe. It never happened to them before. They've conquered others, but they've never been occupied and conquered by another civilization. So that fear of Islam, an irrational fear, has remained for a long while, because the reality is the two civilizations have interacted positively right through history, absorbed from one another. But what is emphasized is this misplaced fear of Islamic civilization. And as a result of that, you have political problems in various parts of the world. Friends, if this is the reality that confronts us, small states, Muslim countries, is there any hope? Now, the rise of China is unique. First time that a power has come up to challenge the existing order without violence or bloodshed. And it is a challenge which is extraordinary for various reasons. It's not just a question of trade, investments. It's not just a question of China's emergence in terms of finance and other aspects of the economy. It is China's rise also as a political power, which is a consequence of these changes that are taking place. But most of all, friends, something which is not emphasized except in some circles, the rise of China is a rise brought about by its mastery of science and technology. As at all times in history, it is one's control over science and technology that makes one a superpower. And China's mastery over science and technology, not just your 5G, not just exploring the other side of the moon, space, technology, and all the rest of it. It is the totality of China's rise in science and technology. And the West knows that this means that they cannot dominate the world anymore. Let me sort of make a couple of points very quickly that I wanted to. Now, if you look at some of the major issues in international politics over the last few decades, the role played by citizens groups, the people, it has been overlooked. To give you one example, the mass mobilization of citizens all over the world against the Iraq war, that was unprecedented. And it was in the interests of the dominant powers to snuff out the impact of what had happened. But what had happened in 2003, at one point you had 50 million people all over the world taking part in different sorts of activities connected with the Iraq war. Now, it's that sort of mass mobilization which I think is very important in terms of bringing about changes to the international system. Basically, when we take a position against a hegemonic global system, we're asking for changes to the international system. We're asking for greater multilateralism, for instance, different centers of power. It won't come about easily, and it will not come about through the UN Security Council or through the generosity of the big powers. It has to come from people's groups as one of many avenues. And this is why I think we should understand the value of this sort of mobilization. Take another example, the global movement against apartheid. It was not the governments. The United States and Britain were very slow in responding to this struggle against apartheid at the global level. It came from citizens' groups. And even in the case of the United States of America, it was church groups and other citizens' groups that were in the forefront at the beginning. So what I'm saying is that citizens' groups have a role to play in trying to reshape the international system, but they haven't realized this potential. And let me say this in all frankness, that I don't think the Chinese government understands this at all. The Chinese government, and I think Chinese society as a whole, does not have an inkling of how citizens' groups can function and how they can mobilize and bring about change, because it doesn't happen within post-1949 China. And this is the reason why I think we should try to convey this. If we want to have change in the international system, citizens' groups must also play a role. And I can think of a few other issues where the stances taken by citizens' groups have had some impact. Minimal, but nonetheless, this is the sort of direction in which we should work, apart from other things that we have talked about in the course of the evening, all the other examples we've given. So I would want to make that point about the role of citizens' groups in bringing about changes to the international system. And here we're talking about a hegemonic system and the fear that people have that this hegemonic system will be replaced by another hegemonic system. I do not think so. I do not think that this will happen. But on the other hand, mass participation by citizens groups, multiple centers of power, and perhaps a very diffused notion of global power and institutions that reflect this diffuse nature of power. I think these are some of the contours of the future. And we should be looking at this in order to understand what is happening. Thank you.